This chapter is very fascinating. Because I've reread this chapter a couple times, went back to the previous chapters and all that, and then looked at this chapter again, and there's only one thing that comes to mind after reading the latest chapter, chapter 53 of The Promised Neverland. It's very obvious that this dude here, he is putting on a show. He is clearly testing the kids, and he's putting on a show. Let me explain why. In chapter 52, the last chapter of The Promised Neverland, right before the kids walked into the door, and you see this man, eating cookies and all that, sugar cookies, and he had a teacup in his hand and all that. And you remember how I talked about his, body, how he had, like, a glove over his hand, most likely it's a prosthetic, or he's hiding something, or you have it to where, like, this man, he obviously is like a sleaze. He's someone that's very carefree. He doesn't dress properly. I even talked about that because of the way his collar was, to the way all of his clothing was put on. I said there's obvious like characteristics about this character that stand out, and he seems like that typical character you would see in a manga that's like laid back and all that, and he's one of those adult characters that lay back and, doesn't really try half the time, but when he does, he will. And that's kind of the correct analysis I did on him. I mean, this chapter clearly shows that even when the kids were summarizing him and thinking, who is he? But there's a couple of things that stand out. Like I said, chapter 52, when we see this man eating cookies, he has a teacup in his other hand, let's look at the scene right before that. You see the man, looks like he's prepping. It's like he's getting ready to open up the sugar cookies and all that. He's prepping himself, and it looks like he's about to put on a show for the children, which is very interesting. It's very interesting, especially when you look at this chapter, and let me discuss some of the details that stand out why I say he's putting on a show. Number one, his clothing. Yes, in most cases, you'll look at this dude, and he looks like he's like a sleaze. He's someone that, can't really dress properly, which makes sense, since he's been by himself for 13 years, he's technically still like a child, and so he probably wouldn't have the best way to kind of clothe himself. But here's the thing, though. If you're putting on a show, and you probably don't have a lot of clothing around, you might just throw anything you can on to put on a show if you know someone is coming. Remember something, okay? Let's point out something that's very, very odd about this entire chapter, but you might not have thought about at all. He has been here for 13 years. Just think about that. That would mean that he was around the same age as these kids. So he's around in like his 20s right now, his mid-early 20s. So that would mean that his clothing, he shouldn't necessarily be able to wear any clothing. Because when he got there, he had clothing for children. And I could see how this entire place would be stockpiled with children's clothing, but why would it have adults' clothing? Think about that. Why would this shelter have adult clothing? Especially when William put all these pins and messages and hints in the books in these different plantations and for children. So it wouldn't make sense for adult clothing to be a part of this shelter unless, William expected them to be there for like 10 plus 13 years or so. So the big thing you can get here is that this man, he threw a couple of things together, clothing that was around or something, and put it on, and he's putting on a show. Because the cookies, holding an air cup, like an air cup of tea, which, like I said, he's not drinking anything. He's just having a cup of tea, which is just air inside of it, so it's like he's not really drinking anything. He's just showcasing, like, oh, I look like I'm a proper adult or whatever. So either he's trying to act like an adult because he's been by himself for 13 years, he's crazy because he's been by himself in isolation for 13 years, or like I said, it's a show, a test for the children. Another thing we need to point out about his character is the fact that there was something that was mentioned in this chapter that has been kind of like a reoccurring gag recently. William is a dirty liar. That's a big thing that's been popping up. William is a dirty liar. William is a dirty liar. This has popped up recently a lot by the children. And then all of a sudden, this dude decides to say it in this chapter. Wouldn't that make sense if he was putting on a show he would be a dirty liar to test these children? But the question is, why would he test these children? Why would he want to do that is the question. Because they've clearly already shown that they must be very smart to escape. But the question is, why would there be a test, though? But with him saying William is a dirty liar, I feel like he's implying that he is William. Or at the very least, there's multiple Williams. Because remember also what he said, there is no Williams here. So basically, that means that there could possibly be multiple, which would explain the cover color picture of the chapter, the bunches of owls and all that. It would also explain how, William has been around for so long, so many years, over 1,000+ years. It's because there's been many generations of Williams, and there has been, like, I guess this entire faction is named after him. Very similar to how everyone in The Walking Dead is called, Negan, how they all go by that name. That could be what's going on here with William. Now, another thing that's really off about this is the planning phase of this. Now, we do know that this man has been here for 13 years, yes. However, we need to factor something in, okay? We know that's a lot of food in 13 years, there's limited supplies, that's common sense. But you're not gonna tell me that if there is adult clothes here, and William expected them to be around that long, that one person could eat through an entire food stock by himself in 13 years. But even then, okay, even if William didn't plan for them to stay there that long, it makes no sense that there is food that survived for over 13+ years. Food does not survive 13 years. End of story. Right then and there, I know this is set in, like, the demon world and all that, but this is still Earth. It has been established that this is still Earth. Yes, we know that there's, futuristic technology and stuff. However, we do know that most likely majority of this is canned food. So it would make no sense that food would be able to survive, that much food would be able to survive for 13+ years. So this obviously is a lie. It's obvious that this man is lying. No food lasts that long. No food does. No food. So that would mean that this man has been getting food drops by William constantly. He's had frequent drops of food, and he either is unaware of this because he's crazy, because he's been alone so long, or, he's lying. So like I said, these little details are definitely something that stand out. And then the electricity. The electricity is a big thing too. Something like electricity, especially to power this place for that long and all that, something like that doesn't just keep running for that long without being noticed. Especially for how many monitors are put up and all that. That's a lot of power it's probably drawing, especially with how big the place is too with power. So this would mean that the electricity, there's also something there. How is the electricity continuing? I mean, I'm curious. So, for the electricity to continue to run for this long, for over 13 years, and even before that, before he even got there, something's powering it, and it's something that's actively being maintained, because something like that's not going to be able to maintain forever. It's going to need maintenance and all that. It won't be able to run non-stop. Then, another thing, yes, even more than that, the pins. So, it's very obvious from what was established in this chapter that there's more to the pin that we know. And it seems like the pin isn't just for finding this shelter, but the pin most likely is a key of some sort. Let me explain. As we know, it's obvious now that William placed this pin in all the different, farms. All the different farms have a pin to lead them to this location. And I'm going to assume that once all of these pins are combined into one area, then the next part of the message will unlock. For instance, they'll know what they need to do and where they need to go. Now, here's another thing, too, to throw on top of this. If the pin really is a key, and let's say this man isn't lying, and he's been here for 13 years, and he has had no contact, that would mean that he probably could not actually accomplish the goal of collecting all the pins. Because remember, he's by himself. And by yourself in this world that's set against you, it's probably not possible to stage a breakout for the other children in the other, farms. So he probably had to give up on the fact of ever getting all the pins and unlocking the way to get out of the demon world. Because if the pins are a key, and he's been by himself the entire time, it's obvious that he just couldn't do anything. It wasn't possible, and that's why he gave up, or was just waiting around, because he just could not accomplish anything by himself. But that could be also the reason why he's testing them, too. The reason why he is testing them, he wants to see if they are strong enough and they're prepared to face a life or death situation and fight against the demons to free more children to get all the pins collected to probably unlock a key that can get them out of this world. That could be what he's trying to prep them for, what this test is for in the first place. He's to scare them, to show them what they need to worry about and face, and that if they're not ready, then they're not going to be able to do anything. So that's probably what he's trying to do here. He's trying to test or resolve, see how they would fight back, see how they would overcome an obstacle, and what would they do for the means of survival. Now, it's clear as day that this man, he's unhinged. He probably has been alone for a very long time. That is one part I do believe somewhat. I mean, I believe he's putting on an act, but I believe at the same time he's probably been alone in isolation, and this man probably hasn't had really any physical contact with another human being for a very long time. He might have been able to talk with someone through a monitor or something because all the monitors, but I don't think he's probably had any physical contact, which would mean that this man is probably fucked up in the head, because 1 year of isolation is going to mess with your sanity quite a bit. No joke, look it up. What isolation does to a human being. It's a real thing, and if you're in isolation for that long, for 13 years, no contact with anyone, you're going to go crazy. You will go crazy. And this is kind of how I look at this situation too, what makes this scene so tragic. If he has been alone for so long, that would mean that this man, he's kind of forced his own isolation. Very similar to how the kids were in isolation, how they were locked up in a farm, in a pen, basically. It's like he went freely into his own cage. That's kind of how this looks. It looks like the man freely caged himself up to keep himself safe. But that would mean that he's no different from what the children are going through all their lives when they were caged up and they had to worry about, you know, being eaten or whatever. So that's basically what's going on here. The man caged himself up similar to how farm animals are caged up or pets are caged up. So it's kind of sad, really, when you think about it like that. But, oh yeah, another thing too, this man is clearly aware that the children escaped 7 days ago. So it shows that this man does have access to outside information. It's not just information in this little area, but he has information to what is going on in recent news. Either he has a connection to like some form of news coverage and all that takes place in the demon world, which could happen, or the man is able to spy on the different farms and see what is going on. Because look, all the monitors, it looks like, you know, like a spy organization looking through different monitors and seeing what's going on around the world. That could be what he's doing. Maybe those different monitors are linked to the different farms and he can view what the children are doing or what's going on and maybe how he can break them out. That could be like a plan of operations or base of operations, so to speak. So yeah, I feel like this is a very good chapter. Emma's in danger. I don't think she will die, but the man is definitely probably a little bit crazy, probably somewhat crazy, but I mean, overall, I do feel like it's more of a test / act than anything else. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. Please be safe. Chibi out.